I see it's one. We should probably let attendees in if there are any, but let's hold the meeting until we get a quorum. Welcome, Barb. And we have Mitch. So I'm seeing 6 directors. And it's 1:01. So let's call the meeting to order at 1:01. And hopefully we'll get 1 or 2 more. Good afternoon. I'm Jeff Cyphers. We have verified that there is a quorum. And so are there any matters subsequent to posting of the agenda? Seeing none, I did want to raise one myself. Just an administrative item is that the December meeting is off our usual schedule. So I want to make sure you all have it on your calendars for December 14th. So if you can check that and make sure you're available or let us know if you're not, that would be super. And I'll go to, I'm not seeing any public yet. Unless there's an objection, I'm going to hold item 4 until later in the meeting, just in case some public do show up. Does anybody object to that? Okay. So let's go to the consent calendar. We have the minutes of October 19 and the resolution to continue video meetings. Anyone wish to pull an item? And is there anyone interested in making a motion?
I'll move.
I'll second.
So Valley and Peninsula. And I do see an attendee. Let me check and see if there's any public comment. So this is on the consent calendar. And if you have a public comment, you can use the raise hand feature. Not seeing any. And I know our team will flag if we've gotten any written public comments. So let's call that item.
Okay, for the consent agenda, Central Coast Community Energy is absent. Clean Power SF,
Yes.
East Bay Community Energy, I believe it's absent. Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes.
and Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Thank you. The consent agenda passes.
And I want to acknowledge I saw Rob Shaw with 3CE and Matthew Marshall with Redwood Coast join. So we're going to move into our regular calendar, and I think we'll begin, Brittany, with the general council update. And I'm excited about this and daunted as we head into. I'm excited to see you all, but I'm also daunted at the fact that the governor is ending his emergency orders for video meetings February 28th of next year. So if you can help us navigate and plan for that, that would be super, Brittany.
Of course. And if we could pull up the slide deck for this item. Okay, perfect. We can go to the next slide. So as was mentioned, there's been some new developments regarding the Brown Act and the remote meeting rules that will apply to the CC Power Board in the next couple of months. The first update is that the state of emergency is going to end on February 28th. So the CC Power Board has been meeting remotely pursuant to AB 361, which was passed last year, which allowed public agencies to meet remotely without meeting certain Brown Act noticing requirements in the event of a state of emergency. So with this coming to an end, the board must either meet in person or observe the normal noticing requirements for remote participation. So if we can go to the next slide. So these are what I'm referring to as the typical noticing requirements for a remote hybrid Brown Act meeting. If there is a member of the board that wishes to participate remotely, the agenda for the board meeting must include the location of any remote participants, and those agendas will need to be physically posted at all remote locations. Those remote locations would also need to be accessible by the public. And in the case of multiple board members participating remotely, at least a quorum of the members need to participate from locations within the jurisdiction of CC Power. So that does not mean that the quorum needs to be in person under this specific clause of the Brown Act, but rather the locations that that the board members are calling in from need to be within the jurisdiction of CC Power.
Brittany, just a clarifying question, the jurisdiction for this purpose, what does that mean?
Yeah, so it is the jurisdiction of any of the members, so encompasses a good portion of California.
Okay, thank you.
So essentially, if you are participating remotely pursuant to this provision of the Brown Act, the location that you're participating from should be a public location that is accessible to the public and has a physical address that can be included in the board meeting agenda. And if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So there was some legislation that was passed earlier this year, AB 2449, that is effective on January 1st. That does lessen these noticing requirements under specific situations. So a board member may participate remotely in a board meeting without providing an address for the agenda and posting the agenda at their location if the board member provides notice for a just cause or an emergency circumstance. And under this clause, at least a quorum of the members of the legislative body need to participate in person from a single location. The public also needs to be afforded a means to participate remotely in the meeting. And the board member that is participating remotely needs to be using both audio and visual technology. So they can't just be calling in, they have to be on camera as well. And the remote board member needs to disclose any individuals that are 18 or over that are at that remote location. So there are a couple caveats to this. One being there's a limit on the number of times a board member can participate remotely under this clause. So for the just cause portion of AB 2449, there is a limit to 2 meetings per calendar year. This 2 meeting limit technically does not exist for emergency circumstances. However, board members may not participate remotely under AB 2449 as a whole more than 3 consecutive months or 20% of the regular meetings within a calendar year. So if we are assuming 12 meetings in a calendar year, that still does limit the remote meetings under this clause to about 2 meetings, even for emergency circumstances. The last thing I wanted to touch on quickly is what constitutes a just cause or an emergency circumstance. So the definition of just cause includes a childcare or caregiving need, a contagious illness that prevents a member from attending in person, a need related to a disability, or traveling while on official business of CC Power or another state or local agency. And then finally, emergency circumstance means a physical or family medical emergency that prevents a member from attending in person. So those are the end of my kind of updates on this. Happy to take any questions. Again, these are kind of brand new rules, so I will answer what I can, but to the extent something maybe has not been fully addressed before, I will look for the answer and get back as we start to navigate these issues.
So what questions do people have? I see Jan Pepper.
So I don't believe we have ever met in person. So I'm wondering where the location is for CC Power. If we were to meet in person, where is that?
So I think we need to choose it, and it doesn't have to be one place as long as we notice it far enough in advance. And my guess is, since our territory stretches from Santa Barbara to Humboldt, which is an enormous territory, but similar to other regional JPAs, somewhere in the middle probably makes sense. So I think one of the things I want to ask for, and so be thinking about this, is if anybody in the San Francisco, Oakland, Marin Peninsula area wants to volunteer a team to run a hybrid meeting and a space, it's a big ask because it's staff time and it takes effort to do that. So be thinking about that while we take questions. Okay, Rob Shaw.
Thank you, Jeff. I would actually recommend, and through the chair would recommend, that we not have meetings in person, and that everybody think about where they would like to participate remotely. Our jurisdiction's so large, we'll always have a quorum within the jurisdiction. So under the traditional Brown Act rules, all we have to do is notice and make available to the public the locations. So my suggestion would be that we identify a location that's a set location and identify a point person for the clerk to be able to coordinate with, to post the agenda in each location, and then we make the public available. So for my location, that would be my conference room. I would provide that to Brittany. She would include it on every agenda, and then I would participate remotely from the conference room where the public could come and participate as they would in any board meeting.
That's fascinating. I wasn't even aware that was an option. All right, Girish Palachandran.
Brittany, I remember participating in NCPA meetings. We'd have commission meetings outside the service territory. But, maybe once or twice a year. It used to be in Monterey or Squaw Valley up in Tahoe. How does that work? Was that because your fourth bullet says it has to be in the jurisdiction?
Yeah, so in-person meetings do need to be within the jurisdiction of CC Power if it is an overall in-person meeting. If you're talking about just the normal Brown Act requirements for remote meetings, a quorum of those calling in do need to be within the jurisdiction. So that is either people meeting in person or people calling in from remote locations. And under the new AB 2449, that does need to be a quorum in person in the jurisdiction.
Yeah, I think in this case, meeting that was held outside of the service territory.
Yeah, my interpretation of the Brown Act is that in-person meetings do need to be in the jurisdiction.
Okay.
Mitch Sears.
Yeah, Rob, that's interesting on the Brown Act. We're having the same discussions sort of internally as well. But I think 3CE has experience sort of conducting meetings that way, maybe with an community advisory committee. How does that work?
Well, like all of us, I think we've been under AB 361 or just the emergency declaration, but even prior to that, we've had remote meetings because of our service territory, and it is exactly as Brittany described it. So noticing where that location is going to be, making sure that there's teleconferencing, IT support so that there can be public comment from that location, and then making sure the agenda is posted. The administrative burden comes from constantly getting new locations. So for the clerk, it's very, very difficult if they need to make a connection with a new clerk or new staff person that can actually post it, make sure that that room is available. So in order to manage that, just getting everyone to identify up front where that location is going to be, have a designated IT person, a designated clerk to take out the administrative burden, makes it much easier to manage from a staff perspective. I do think, Brittany, that we need to have a designated location for our regular meetings. As part of the Brown Act, we have to have a set time and location. So we may still want to designate a home location for CC Power meetings, but I don't know that we need to actually move to a fully in-person setting.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. That's absolutely right. And the one kind of caveat I would add to that with this new AB 2449 is there is a little bit of conflict there. If there is a board member that wants to participate remotely, but is not in a public location or cannot share their location, unless the rest of the board is meeting in person or a quorum of the board is meeting in person, they cannot participate through 2449. So it would be either through an alternate or in a public location.
And Brittany, through the chair, Brittany, I think that there are limitations on the number of times that you can take advantage of the provisions under that. So
Yes.
Okay.
Barbara Hale.
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation, Brittany. Could you elaborate a little bit on if we are all doing as Director Shaw suggested, meeting remotely from separate locations, how does the public participate? Those locations have to be accessible to the public. And so just to play this out, if I were in a conference room in San Francisco, it would have been posted, the public would know that that's where to come if they wanted to present. So they would need to come to the conference room, and that's where the tech support comes in, I think, that Rob's talking about. Talk a little bit about that piece, please. I'm not quite sure I'm understanding exactly what folks are proposing. Yeah,
so the agenda would include every address that the board members are calling in from.
Mm-hmm.
And that a physical agenda would then be posted at each of those locations.
Mm-hmm.
So the public would have that notice on the agendas of where to go. There would also be, we would provide a call-in option for members of the public as well. And so one of the administrative issues is if everybody is just calling in from their conference room at their CCA, we have that address, we know how to connect and use the call-in features for there. If people are moving addresses constantly, we have to make sure that we're on top of that and that it is getting posted. One of the administrative burdens, if we do a hybrid situation, is then we are making sure that we have, audio visual in the room connected to public that is at remote locations as well. So does that answer your question or?
Yeah, I guess.
Maybe expand a bit on the very last thing you said. So if Rob's proposal was followed, then it would be 100% remote with the public not requiring two-way video and audio in every public space, or still requiring that?
Under the traditional Brown Act rules, I believe it's just either or, well, audio, but could be audio and visual, but does not require, it's AB 2449 that does require both audio and visual. So it could just be a phone line calling in and then the public would be in the room.
Okay, and the good news is we don't have to solve all this today, but we should probably bring this back to the December meeting, because I know there are at least a couple of board members who aren't here today as well, and talk about it again. And maybe if there's any remaining questions, think about what would be useful for us to study and figure out between now and the next meeting. Is there anything we need to kind of nail down? Seeing no further questions. All right, well, we'll talk about it again in December. Let's see if there's any public comment on this topic. This is item 6A. You can raise your hand if you have any. Not seeing any hands raised. And there's no action. So let's move on to 6B. And this is an update on our strategic business plan. And I know Phyllis Curry's here today. Thank you for being here, Phyllis. But I think, Tim, you were going to kick this off. Is that right?
I'll say a few words and then turn it over to Phyllis. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just as a reminder, the Strategic Business Plan Committee members are Balachandran, Mitchell Sears, who is the lead to the committee. The purpose of today's discussion is that Phyllis will present the draft of the strategic business plan. As with the updates that we've provided in September and October, Phyllis and I will work with the committee to incorporate your comments into the final plan that will be presented at the December 14th board meeting. Before I turn it over, I just want to make an observation about what you're going to be considering. This is a 3-year plan, but the focus is on year 1. And as such, I think that it's going to be a useful resource for the general manager selection committee and the potential candidates. The plan lays out what the board and the general manager have in front of you in order to be able to realize the board's vision for CC Power. And then to pirate some of Garisha's words, this provides a roadmap for the next general manager. And I think that's how I have viewed this, is that it's going to be a very informative document for the incoming general manager. But the thing that I think is important to note is that this is a framework for standing up CC Power. And as a result, I think it's going to be important for the general manager to be working closely with the board, and in particular, the chair, in implementing this plan. And I wanted to flag that just because in your January meeting, you're either going to be electing or re-electing your chair for the CC Power board. And this is an important feature of what it is that the general manager and the board need to be able to be in close coordination on as 2003 unfolds and the new general manager settles into their position. So with that, I'll just turn this over to Phyllis and ask her to walk through the slide deck.
Okay, thank you, Tim, and thank you to all of you who have participated. You know, this presentation really reflects the interviews that you were kind enough to give your time to, and many of your staff also were able to weigh in. We did have a few people who were kind of outside of CC Power, but they were also people that the ad hoc committee thought could have some relevant comments. So let me share my, are you going to do it, Tim? Thank you. Okay. All right. So let's go to the next slide. You know, I added this vision and mission section just because you typically see this in strategic plans. The vision really comes from your website, and the mission statement comes from section 2.02 of the JPA agreement. At some point, you may want to wordsmith this some more, but I thought for the purposes of this draft that this would suffice. Next slide. So I conducted 20 interviews, 9 board members, 11 others. And what I got from this was that from particularly board members, the value of CC Power is the benefits that come from working together. And so, you know, CC Power really has the potential to enable a lot of responses to the regulatory issues that confront you now and which will confront you in the future, but also opportunities to have savings for your respective agencies and the people you serve. And then also over and over, people that were interviewed, particularly the board, pointed to being in a position to take advantage of the opportunities that are expected to come from the Inflation Reduction Act. Next slide. So I tried to frame what I heard as strategic priorities. Many strategic plans, they try to focus in on, you know, where do we put our vision? So first of all, it's building the capacity within the organization that will give the value to the members. And this includes decisions that you're already undertaking with regard to a full-time general manager, but also clarifying and adding where necessary, operating policies and procedures. Another priority will be to successfully bring to delivery the long storage projects and the firm capacity resources that you're already engaged in. Pursuing opportunities from the Inflation Reduction Act. And several indicated that that could include some innovative technologies that would be more difficult to go after if you're working individually. And then last but not least, savings. Savings because you're jointly going after programs and services that in many cases you're now doing individually, or what you see prospectively as something that's going to be of value. Next slide. So I tried to just put this in the framework, as Tim indicated. It's 3 years, but it's year one that I think is the key year. And that's where you build the capacity and you focus on the projects, but also that you look to support further joint investments, because nothing beats success. So trying to have not only the group come together, but to show the success of working together. That's really where I think you would get a lot of value if you can pursue these goals in year one. With year two, that's an opportunity to add to the portfolio. More projects, more programs, more services that leverage the capacity that you built in year one. And then year three, I borrowed this from somebody who I interviewed. Dream big. Building, owning, operating projects if you see opportunities there, but also exploring innovation. Next slide. So with the support of the ad hoc committee and their input, we tried to come up with a suggested timeline. This is a suggestion, things will change, but looking at where you are now, adopting the strategic business plan and hiring a general manager in this current fiscal year, giving the general manager an opportunity to assess the business plan, and more importantly, come back with an action plan with the specific goals and detailed timetable of things that would allow you to accomplish those goals. And then having that before you adopt the 23-24 budget. Then allowing for opportunities over time to do assessments. The GM will give you updates, and then you'll make course corrections, because most strategic plans, they're changing almost when you sign the document. But I mean, I think that's to be expected. But then having whatever updates will drive decisions that will be in the 24-25 budget. Again, this is a suggestion. You know, you'll probably change it, but we just wanted to lay something out for consideration. Next slide. So I just tried to group the elements that are in year one. The subsequent slides will go into detail, but you can see the focus is on action: implement, launch, review, refine, augment, undertake. So it's a year of getting things done. Next slide. So one of the first things that I'm identifying based on the feedback is the goal of successful implementation of the 4 projects you're committed to. And the value of those projects is in the order of 2 billion plus. And this is a consistent theme that I heard from all of the members. And I heard it from people who weren't members, who saw that successful completion is really a way of reinforcing the credibility and the benefits of acting together. A key thing would be looking at things like a coordinated operations agreement and a scheduling coordinator agreement. And my understanding that these are things that are already underway, that are being focused on, but it allows you to look at managing all of the pre-COD contractual obligations. And a key thing here is that this will move to the general manager. So one idea is to review and standardize project oversight processes. And you'll see that little red bullet. The ad hoc committee's input included some things where they thought they should be highlighted for the first 90 days of a general manager's activities. So this review, which is already underway to some regard, is something that the general manager would undertake. But a key thing here is that this operational responsibility moves from the way it is now to the full-time general manager. They will assign tasks, coordinate consultant work, but importantly, they're going to work in a collaborative fashion with project participants. Because an important thing here is continuing to get the expertise of the staff that many of you have on your own teams that have been working so diligently up to now with these projects, but recognizing that they have significant responsibilities in their day jobs, allowing them to be more into a support and advisory role, as opposed to having to take the reins and drive these projects. Another thing that the general manager should work with project participants is coordinating the way that you identify future projects. And a lot of times that means a series of meetings where you're talking out loud to each other, you are sharing ideas, and you're engaging in figuring out where to focus and then doing the work needed that are going to bring to the board proposals that you want to pursue. This is also looking at having a process where you can address technical, financial, and legal concerns of various members. One of the things that I heard from time to time was some members felt that the issues that they had in an area weren't really given the time and attention that they wanted it to have. So this suggests that the general manager will have a team approach to working with project participants and be able to allow this information to be drawn out and to come up in terms of ideas that get action. So let me go to the next slide. You know, go back one. I think there's another point here that I really want to get at. A lot of what I'm suggesting here is something that other joint action agencies undertake. So for instance, I had a lot of personal experience with the Southern California Public Power Authority, and their operation had kind of what we call the working groups. So you had an opportunity for members of the different member staffs to get together and talk informally. And it gave an opportunity for ideas to be exchanged in a way that projects bubbled up as a result. So this is kind of the thought that I want to share with you, that engagement of your staff in a more informal way, but then the general manager will bring all that information to you and allow you to make decisions based on the collective thinking, if you will, of your staff. I think that will be very important for moving projects, programs, and services going forward. Okay, next slide. I think year one is also important to show success of joint participation by launching at least 2 joint programs and services. You already have 4 projects, 4 ambitious projects. And adding programs and services is something that I heard from several board members as being more of their focus going forward than more projects. So I'm not suggesting that you don't consider projects, but I'm just thinking that you try to round out the portfolio and also round out the experience of the members working together by focusing on at least 2 programs or services during this 1-year time frame. And that's going to require that you have a process to figure out what members are interested in. But I'm also suggesting that you think about flexible models of participation. So some members will want to do, there'll be some projects that maybe all members want to do, but there'll be some projects that only a few members want to do. So figuring out how to give members the leeway to move in the direction that fits with their own model of operation. You'll all have your integrated resource plans, but you'll also have services that you may either currently be getting, sometimes from the same provider, or there'll be additional services that you think would be useful and you want to collectively go after them. I've just put some examples down here. The customer interface with PG&E, I heard from many of you that that is something that you all have to do, and you're using a common vendor in many regards to do that. So that might be something to take a look at. Scheduling coordination, again, that's something that is very needed. Data management, direct installation of energy efficiency. You know, some of you are either doing that or you're pursuing it now. There's nothing wrong with taking a look at work that one member may be doing that shows promise for either replicating or expanding to other CC Power members. So again, these are just a few suggestions, you know, to think about. Next slide. So the governance framework, I try to make it clear that this is a review. I'm not suggesting that you have to start from scratch. You already have a level of governance, but I think defining the role of the board and the general manager is important. And again, you can see the note about this being maybe within the first 90 days of the general manager's focus. So, you know, typically the board set policies, they approve agreements and budgets, they give direction. Here we're suggesting making it very clear that the general manager has the operating responsibility. They can propose policies, budgets, coordinate proposals, but they will be taking a lot of actions that ultimately may need board approval, but they're moving it along and bringing you the concept as well as what is needed to implement. And getting back to this idea of working groups, committees, whatever you want to call it, it's really carving out that area where your staff can meet informally and as needed and talk about things that might result in a decision that comes to the board. And I think I want to make it clear, here we're talking about informal meetings, not groups that have decision-making authority. And their role really is to provide support as well as input to the general manager. It's also, again, where they can share member concerns. As I said earlier, one model for this is the Southern California Public Power Authority. And in every public meeting of the board, the general manager there gives a report to the board on which working groups have met in the past month, what they talked about, and then whether any of those ideas are going to get further interest or further action. But it gives the public an idea to know what's being thought about, but you don't have to have all of the formality that you would have if these groups were decision-making bodies. And then a final thing is the general manager will be the person that coordinates the consultant services. The board authorizes and may consider delegating some authority to the general manager, but you would want to make sure that the coordination and ensuring that the cost are managed appropriately is something that the general manager has his or her eye on. So again, this framework is focusing the responsibility of the general manager and making the member staff expertise something that is part of the decision-making process. Next slide. So I thought I would add just one slide talking about some of the areas where you may want to focus in on some additional policies, procedures. Two big categories here, financial and communications. On the financial, it's really taking a look at what's going to be needed as you pursue more obligations. You know, the budget, of course, is something that will have a focus for the general manager. Again, it's got the first 90 days bullet, but also there's a lot of day-to-day stuff that has to be done. Payments, deciding how much cash you need on hand. Do you have to create reserves and reserve policies? Some of this work you may already have underway, but again, it needs to be something that is looked at very closely, and it will continue to evolve as CC Power does more work together. And then the other thing here is taking a look at what are the options for financing future projects. I mean, certainly this is something, the more projects you look for, the more you're going to have to think about how to finance it. What are the issues around the credit rating? I know several of you have credit ratings, and I know at least one or two of you are looking at what does it take to get credit ratings for your agencies. And then, you know, I thought it might be worthwhile evaluating whether there's some opportunity to collaborate with the Community Choice Financing Authority. Their scope right now is one that you may want to think about. Can that be expanded in some way that makes it more conducive for future financing? And then with communications, I think we always have to ask yourself, who is CC Power? Does the market know? Do vendors know? What's the level of awareness? Because even when you're going out with a request for proposal, you want the prospective vendors to clearly know who CC Power is. And so how you do that, there are many, many ways that you can expand awareness of CC Power, and that it is a business, is a good business to work with, and also that it is an entity that is getting things done. So just two areas to offer for your consideration. I'm sure there'll be many more as time goes on. Next slide. So activities around the Inflation Reduction Act are in process now. So the Internal Revenue Service has been charged with trying to develop a lot of the implementation processes that particularly deal with the tax credits. And they have asked for public comments on a number of areas. And I think many of the deadlines for those comments are either this month or early next month. And many organizations are weighing in, asking for clarification on various parts of the tax credits. The expectation is that the decisions on the rules and processes will be finalized sometime in 2023. But I think there are things that can be done during this year one timeframe where you get more familiarity with the detail, but also monitor that process to make sure that if IRS is coming up with definitions that would hinder your participation, you have an opportunity to weigh in either individually or through CalCCA. It might be helpful to consider having one or more workshops about the Inflation Reduction Act, just as you continue to familiarize yourself. And then you're likely going to see a number of various financial and legal consultants who are focusing in on this, want to, provide information that will allow you to understand how to optimize the provisions. There are the tax credits are in a lot of different areas. The thing that we have been, I think, most aware of is this direct pay of the tax credits, as opposed to the existing situation that requires a tax exempt entity to try to partner with someone who is a taxpayer. But there's also language there that talks about either enhancing credits or reduction in credits for various situations. One has to do with how labor is dealt with, how environmental justice issues are dealt with. So there's a lot of complexity still that has to be ironed out. So attention to this during year one, I think, is very, very important. Next slide. So that's year one. Year two, here, I think as I mentioned at the outset, adding projects to the portfolio, I think should be a real focus for year two. You can continue to work on building capacity because you will always see things that are beneficial to add as you go along, but also assess the implications of ownership. Many board members have expressed a desire to consider that. And of course, the resource and budget requirements have to be considered. Managing, developing, and constructing and operating generation assets brings, benefits, but it also brings risk. You'll also have to consider things like California's liability and inverse condemnation rules. Many of you probably are very familiar with that because you've had to deal with the wildfire impacts on your service territory, but you haven't been the agency or the entity that is then having to deal with the financial impacts. Again, continue to assess the issues around financing and credit. Another area that I think will be important is to look at what partnerships would be helpful. Some of you already have relationships with these entities that I've listed on the slide, but they are doing projects, they are exploring things that might be things that you are also interested in. So looking at the opportunities to either work with a vendor that they have negotiated an arrangement with, or propose a joint venture approach to a vendor for a service. I think that is all worthwhile in terms of figuring out what would be useful to you. And then, as I think I mentioned earlier, some of you are already engaged in programs and services. And, you know, if it's successful, it might be something where other members of CC Power want to pursue as well, replicate a program, or even expand an existing one. Next slide. So again, I thought, you know, just listing some projects, EV charging installations. There are vendors that are proposing on turnkey services, where they take on the obligation to provide the charging infrastructure, do the installation, maintain the site, and then take care of the billings tied to the electrical use. So looking at a service like that might be something that you could think about. What some joint powers authorities do is they find a service and then they replicate it in the service territory of every member, and they brand it for the member. So it's not CC Power putting something in, it's the individual CCA, but CC Power has enabled that activity. Joint subscription services, you're probably all getting S&P Global, okay? So going after a deal with them, they do deals with others, so I'm sure that they would be more than willing to entertain something. But jointly doing your energy efficiency programs, processing rebates, finding entities that will take the data that you're accumulating and help you analyze what other benefits can you get from it. So I think that there are many opportunities. Again, the challenge will be coming up with the process that allows you to survey members and figure out what has the most interest, and then how to proceed in a way that gives some flexibility. Again, going back to the Southern California Public Power Authority, they have engaged in many, many projects and services by negotiating master service agreements with a vendor. And because the vendor has the prospect of getting a lot of business, they will negotiate very attractive terms, and the agreement allows for subsequent task orders by individual members with vendor, so that the service is tailored to the area of the member. And again, it allows to brand a service for the member. So it's not SCAPA doing something, it is Pasadena Water and Power, it's Anaheim. They are branding this service in their service territory, but it is enabled again by this master agreement. Next slide. So this is the last slide, and this is just, again, year 3 is the dream build, dream big year, but it's also looking at, and this is something that I heard from at least 2 or 3 board members, exploring emerging technologies, but also doing so in a way where you share your risk. And, you know, there are projects out there that are in various stages, large scale onshore wind, offshore wind, more geothermal. So by this time, you will be well positioned to think about owning as well as doing PPAs. More solar with storage and more energy storage projects. And then things like central management of demand response. Demand response will be more and more important as time goes on, and aggregating your resources so that you could bundle it and bring it into the California ISO. I think it's something that's well worth spending some time on and thinking about. So those are the slides. Again, this is a draft, and I will be interested in your feedback, and hopefully it reflects a lot of the things that you have thought about, and that you know, we can proceed from there.
Thank you, Phyllis. This is fantastic. I'm so glad you've been with us and working with us and helping us pull all these ideas together into one place. It's very exciting for me. And you actually, while you were speaking near the end, I was reminded of how the rural electric co-ops often provide services to each other as well. And so I was reminded that I might want to reconnect with that whole world and learn about how they're doing various things, because I haven't been in that world in quite a long time. So let's open it up. So I think we're looking for input. There's no action today, and happy to take input from any of our members. Who wants to go first?
I've got my pen ready.
Okay. Should we check in with the ad hoc first on anything that Phyllis missed?
No, I don't think that there's anything that Phyllis missed. I think from the committee's standpoint, it's pretty comprehensive. Over the past couple of months, obviously, we've provided updates, and the work has progressed to the point that you see it now. So I think, I don't want to speak for Lori and Girish exactly, but we appreciate the work that both Tim and Phyllis have put in on this. And I think it reflects the feedback that we've gotten from the board so far. So
Thanks. I did see Barb Hale raised a hand. Go ahead, Barb.
Thank you. I guess I just wanted to begin by amplifying Jeff's thankful praise to you, Phyllis. This is so helpful, and to the committee that you worked with. Thank you so much for the leadership and pulling these thoughts together. I find in particular the way you framed it super helpful, and the focus on the 3 years and the emphasis that you've laid out for action. I think that's important for us. Interested in particular about sort of how to handle these first 90 days for the new GM. That's going to be such a critical time on quite a few big issues that have been identified here. And I guess I'm just flagging for my colleagues here that I think we need to be thoughtful about our expectations in those first 90 days, and how much support a person coming on is going to need to be successful tackling all those issues. I do find it kind of interesting that in a 3-year strategic plan, we're talking so much about things that are so much in our faces, right? 90 days, first year. So while I really appreciate this framing, I also feel a sense of urgency from it, and a sense of sort of like the bigness of the task in front of us for that first year, that first 90 days of the new leadership. So thank you.
Good. Girish Balachandran.
Obviously, thank you, Phyllis. Great presentation today. So I think I just wanted to emphasize maybe Tim's comments when he introduced the topic. There's a bit of a handoff here. There's a partial handoff to the search committee, because there's been a lot of work that has been done in distilling board input into this 3-year plan. And so in recruiting someone, in a way, they're having a conversation with us even before meeting us when they see this plan. Then, of course, when they come in and talk to all of us, the first 60, 90 days, we'll figure out what, we'll actually do. But I think that's one step. The second is kind of like what, Laurie's been working on the budget committee, and we have a 6-month budget essentially through June. And the strategic plan, you think about actions we'll be asked to take. It's kind of the projection is that 6-month budget burn rate will continue for a few years. So I think it's just iterating and emphasizing where we're headed.
Thank you. Lori Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Phyllis. Really great work here, and just want to reiterate some of what Mitch and Gurish have said. I agree there's a lot of work ahead of us, and just really great job here, kind of laying out some of those near-term tasks. And again, want to echo what Gurish said around, the budget and hiring the new leadership. I think that's going to be very, very important over the next 6 months. So just appreciate all of the committee's work and the board's support of that. Really excited to see where CC Power goes from here.
Me too. I'm excited to have this as a document too, so that we can, as we go through the search, people can read it and digest it and get more insight into who the board is, what we're looking for. Anyone see anything they want to change in this presentation? Does it feel good? Does it feel right? Barb Hale?
So I'd offer that it does feel good. It feels right. I see in some of the suggestions for collaboration, very familiar public entities. I think we should also be looking to some of the more regional, local folks. Maybe the Wrens are a resource that we should be thinking about, not just the folks who traditionally do power generation, but the folks who do, whose focus is more on energy efficiency and decarbonization, building decarbonization.
It's a good suggestion. I know Matthew's CCA up in Humboldt has been fulfilling a lot of the roles of Wrens for decades, and so he might be knowledgeable about how to do that. So
I'll add that.
Gurish, you've got a second. Go ahead.
Yeah, just one, I was just thinking, since we all work with Cal CCA, I think sharing this with Beth also, both from the search standpoint, but also, just knowing what we're going to be doing in the next 3 years will probably be helpful for her in the legislative space too.
Excellent. I'll do that. Okay. Let's ask for public input. Anybody in the public wish to provide comments on 6B, strategic business plan? Not seeing hands, so we'll bring it back, and I believe there's no action, right, Tim? This is input and update only, right?
Correct.
Okay. Well, thank you both, Tim and Phyllis. I appreciate all your work on this. So we'll move to 6C, an update on the general manager search, and I think I'm kicking that off, and Tim or Lori, if you have any updates, let me know, but this is a fairly brief update. So we have connected as an ad hoc committee. We've talked about the use of a recruiter, and we're interested in doing so. And we have also put together a job description, and now that this strategic business plan is nearing completion, that's going to be very helpful. And so we're nearing the point where we would engage a recruiter and go out with a solicitation. And we're also being advised that it's heading into the holiday season, and this is probably one of the toughest times to get attention in the market. And so one of the things that's a real possibility is that we actually hold the solicitation until early January and then go as quickly as we can. And the other option is to go ahead and release it, but not expect to hold interviews until perhaps late January, so that we leave it open for longer. And I'm really open to either pathway, and I think a recruiter would help advise us on that. So unless people have specific experience with that, I think we could follow the recruiter's advice too. And then the other matter is that engaging a recruiter has a cost. And so one of the things that we discussed is asking the board and agendize to delegate the power to the ad hoc committee to negotiate and enter into an agreement with a recruiter within our current adopted budget. So without increasing our current adopted budget. But that would imply an expense at some point in probably first quarter of 2023. So I wanted to make sure that that was understood and see if there's any further updates. Tim or Lori, do you have any further updates before we turn it over for discussion?
Yeah, Jeff, no, I thought that was a really great update, but just wanted to clarify. Yes, there will be an expected expense in January, but no expected increase or cash call to the existing budget. Very much trying to manage within the existing budget, to get us through the end of the fiscal year before we approve the new budget. And I know that was important to many board members, including myself. So we'll continue to manage within that. There are savings from other areas of the existing budget that could fund this.
Thanks for that clarification. Yeah. Okay. So is there any input or questions on that item? I see Girish Balchandran first. Go ahead.
Jeff, you had asked for input on whether to post the RFP.
If you have it, otherwise I think we would want to have the ad hoc make that decision working with a recruiter, but
Okay.
we would obviously notify the board when that solicitation goes live and encourage you to share it.
Yep.
But if you have input on that, happy to hear it.
I think I'm just kind of like, we want this general manager in sooner than later, but I think you're right, ask the recruiter. And yeah, also utilize our network. So looking forward to shipping it out to other people.
Will do. Yeah. And Barb Hale.
So did the committee already decide on a recruiter? You're saying no
No.
recruiter. So if not, I'm kind of wondering how you're navigating that part of the process.
So we've received recommendations for two different firms so far, and I've called and met with both. I'm happy to add a third. I think I want to leave it at 3 because we already have some good folks out there. But if anybody has a recommendation for a third, I'm happy to hear it and engage and connect. And then I think the ad hoc's going to meet and make a decision, and we'll go from there. Any further input on this? Seeing none, so let's ask for any public comment. This is on 6C. And this is an action item because it implies a future expenditure. And so Resolution 22-1102 would authorize us to issue an RFP and execute a contract with a recruiter, conduct interviews and develop a contract, but not sign it. So what we would then do, and in the resolution, it specifically says that we would then bring a finalist or finalists back to the full board to meet in closed session for essentially the final interview to determine if that's an acceptable candidate. And so I would ask if there's a motion to approve that resolution or any questions clarifying it.
Ready to make a motion?
And I'll second.
Okay, Silicon Valley and San Jose. Let's call the roll.
For resolution 22-1102, Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Clean Power SF,
Yes.
East Bay Community Energy, believe is absent. Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes.
Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Thank you. The resolution passes.
Thank you. And we're on item 7. If there's any individual member news or updates? Does anyone have anything share worthy? All right. Seeing none. We are adjourned. It is 2:10. Thank you all for a good meeting. That was a good update meeting. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.